So when the price changes, we change our consumption of a good for two reasons, the income and the substitution effect. When price changes, we change our consumption due to two effects. The substitution effect, So we'll explore these one at a time, but the substitution effect is about the relative change in prices. So if a good became relatively cheaper, we'll start purchasing more of that good. And the second reason behind this change in consumption, this total change in consumption, is going to be the income effect. And the income effect is about how changes in prices really change the purchasing power of our budgets. And in a way, they act like income changes, like changes to our budget. So think about if, the prices at Queen's to purchase Starbucks or food or whatever all of a sudden doubled. Even if you got the same amount of money as you did last semester or whatever, or last year, you can purchase less. So it's like an income, prices going up is almost like an income going down. So there's this income effect. I know that income's not changing directly, but the purchasing power of our income, our budget, is changing. And this is going to change how much of each good we buy. Because we've learned about different types of good. Inferior goods and normal goods, right? All right, so when price changes, we see this total change in how much of this good we want to purchase or consume. And we can decompose this total change in how much we want to purchase or consume into two different effects, the substitution effect and the income effect. Let's start with the substitution effect. So with the substitution effect is when consumers change their consumption due to relative price changes. For example, let's say the price of tacos goes up, like that last example we were looking at with tacos and soda. This means that tacos have become relatively more expensive compared to soda than it was before, than they were before. So if the price of tacos goes up, then all of a sudden tacos are relatively more expensive. And we're going to shift our consumption away from things that become relatively more expensive. So we're going to shift consumption away from goods that become relatively more expensive. So that's what the substitution effect is all about. It's all about how a change in price is changing the relative price between these two goods that we're looking at. So for instance, the price of tacos goes up, and we're looking at the market for tacos and sodas, and the price of soda remains constant, then tacos have become relatively more expensive than they used to be. So the optimal consumption of, or optimal bundle that we were having before has got to change. And the substitution effect is going to make us purchase less tacos and more soda. So that's one part of the change in consumption between these two goods. In general, we're going to think of this substitution effect as being bigger than this income effect, except in this special case, or except in one special case, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. All right, so this is the substitution effect. Let's erase this and talk about this second effect, this income effect, or often called the real income effect. How these change in price, for instance, this increase in the price of taco has changed the purchasing power of our entire budget. So now let's talk about the other effect, the income effect. So a change in the price of one of the goods is going to change the purchasing power of our entire budget. Change in price of one good changes the purchasing power of our budget. So for instance, like I was kind of alluding to before, let's say the prices in Kingston double next week, but your budget remains the same. Your purchasing power is cut in half in that sense. So even though it's a price change, it's kind of causing our income to change, our real income, our purchasing power to change. So that's what we're kind of capturing, this income effect. Because price changes are kind of affecting our purchasing power, changes in consumption due to this change in the purchasing power, we're going to call that the income effect. So for example, if the price of tacos goes up, our purchasing power of our budget decreases. Unless we're spending our entire money on soda, we can afford less of both goods. So it's influencing both of these goods. All right, we also learned about two different types of goods. So remember we had normal goods. And so with normal goods, if our purchasing power, our real income goes up, real income goes up, for instance, from a fall in prices, consumption for that good will increase due to this income effect. The income effect portion of this total change in consumption will be positive. We also learned about inferior goods. And here, if real income increases with inferior goods, remember that demand or consumption decreases. Now this is just the income effect part of it, not the total consumption. This is just the consumption due to the income effect. And now we can talk about, so usually the sub effect is greater than the income effect. So that first effect we talked about, this change in relative prices which changes our consumption, the effect of that is greater than the effect of this. But sometimes it's not. And when it's not, there's a special case. And here, we call a Giffen good is a inferior good where the substitution effect is less than the income effect. And what's going to happen here is we're going to have an upward sloping demand curve. Okay, let's quickly kind of sum up this price change. So when there's a change in prices, so this is exogenous change in prices, not due to our decisions, but due to the markets, our consumption of these two goods is going to change. And there's going to be a total change in consumption of tacos and a total change in consumption of soda. But what we want to do is decompose that total change into two different effects: the substitution effect and the income effect. The substitution effect is the change in consumption of tacos, let's say, due to the fact that if the price of tacos goes up, they became relatively more expensive than they used to. The other part of this change in the total consumption of tacos is going to be due to the income effect. And here, if the price of tacos is going up, that's like our real income is going down. And so whether that increases or decreases our consumption of tacos, whether the income effect is positive or negative, depends on whether tacos are normal or inferior goods. But these two effects together, income and substitution effect, combine to determine the overall effect.